Couple things to get to today. I've got a wild trade idea, and also we'll get Trey Matthews from Locked On Devils on what went wrong and right during Lindy Ruff's tenure in New Jersey. Coming up on Locked On Sabres.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have got a super competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go. The mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. To join your friends, download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. A lot to get to on today's episode of Locked On Sabres. Your man Sneaky Joe DiBiase here, taking you through it. Amerks off today, getting ready for a playoff game back in Syracuse on Thursday. So we got some time there. We've got Leafs and Bruins coming your way tonight. I think I misspoke on our last show. That's coming tonight. And we'll see if we can fire up the Mitch Marner trade machine by the next time we speak. I've got another trade idea today that's a little outlandish and a little unrealistic, but wanted to throw it by you. And then we'll get Trey Matthews from Locked On Devils in on Lindy Ruff's tenure in New Jersey. The positives, the negatives, whether he would label it a success or a failure in general, and some things that we could take away about new Lindy, if you will. I talked to Lindy this morning on WGR. That was surreal. It was weird. I have interviewed Sean McDermott on a weekly basis on the Extra Point Show at WGR. I interviewed Don Granato on a weekly basis this past season, but something about it being Lindy just hit different. There was an extra tension for me, just that this was my coach. He is hired when I am 2 years old, and he is fired when I'm in high school. So he was the coach. He was the only coach I knew for the Sabres, and he's still the only one I've ever seen take them to the playoffs. So Lindy is like it's on another level. So talking to him, he was a really good conversation about what he sees for the team going forward. I liked some of the things he had to say about the center position. I asked him about Tage and Cousins specifically, and he referenced Hughes and Hischier in New Jersey. He didn't even have to go all the way back to Lindy or to Drury and Briere. He knows the importance that you got to maximize the production from your top two centers. He did that in New Jersey with Hughes and Hischier. We'll get more on those two, though, when Trey Matthews joins us coming up in the second and third segments of today's show. So a lot to get to. I'll be glad to be talking to Lindy during the season. One of the benefits of doing the morning show at WGR. So that's coming up in a couple of months. If you want to catch that interview, it's available wherever you get your podcast and on the Odyssey app. So before we get to that, the playoffs, real quick commentary in the playoffs, and then I've got a trade idea to run by everybody that is related to some news in the league in the past 24 hours. But on the playoffs, the NHL playoffs are really getting to a dangerous point when it comes to ratings, TV revenue, and the business end of the NHL. I do like talking about and thinking about the business end of sports. And when it comes to the NHL on this, they've got a real nightmare on their hands because owners, commissioners, TV executives, what do they want? They want long series. They want the maximum amount of games, the maximum amount of tickets, maximum amount of eyeballs and ads. Just think, if there's no game 6, game 7, those are ads that don't run. That is money that doesn't go in the league's pocket, which is then money that doesn't go in the player's pocket in turn because of revenue sharing. So what are we looking at in the first round? A lot of short series. We had one end last night. Florida wins in 5 over Tampa. They won 6-1 over the Lightning. The Lightning were pulling the goalie at the end. It got ugly late. It was 2-1 with like 6 minutes to go. Not a surprise there. Tampa is aging out. It looked like, from Steven Stamkos' perspective, that is his final game in Tampa. The way he kind of stayed around, looked around. He looked like a guy that might have thought he's playing his final game for Tampa Bay. We'll talk more about the Lightning this offseason, especially if they have no Stamkos. But that series is over. You already had Washington get swept by the Rangers. That's 2 series that are over. And coming up on Tuesday night, if Boston, Carolina, Colorado, and Vancouver all win, 4 series could end tonight. And then tomorrow, you have Oilers, Kings. If the Oilers win tomorrow, if you get those 4 results tonight, this is probably not going to happen because you need 5 things to happen. But this is the nightmare scenario. If 4 results go the way I just described tonight, and then the Oilers beat the Kings tomorrow, 1 series. 1 series remaining in like a week. It's 2-2 between Vegas and Dallas. There's an outcome where Dallas, we're all just sitting around waiting for Dallas to end. And I mean, if that goes 7, I mean, game 7 between Dallas and Vegas, I guess I over-exaggerated that a little bit. That would be coming your way on Sunday. But that's a ton of games that you would be watching that might become available to you. So I'm kind of rooting for some closer series, despite the fact that a lot of these teams, I think, are a lot better than who they're matched up against. Before we get to Trey Matthews on the Devils, some news in the league yesterday that it made me think of this interesting trade idea. So Sean Couturier, captain of the Philadelphia Flyers, he reportedly has switched agents, which has a lot of people in Philadelphia kind of eyebrows up like, ooh, okay, what's going on here? Why do you change agents? Especially when, if you're Couturier, you are in year 2 of an 8-year contract. You just wrapped up year 2 of an 8-year contract. You're not going anywhere. 2030, his contract expires. So there's no renegotiation of a contract. You don't really need an agent for 7 years unless you might want out of Philadelphia. And that wouldn't be a surprise because Couturier and John Tortorella didn't mix. They went at it this past season. Couturier got benched. That did not sit well with the Flyers, the players at least. And Couturier was upset by that. So, okay, here we go. Does this guy, the captain of the Flyers, not want to play for Tortorella? And is he going to try to make a power play here of, listen, that's fine if you don't want to get rid of John Tortorella, but I don't want to play for him anymore. Get me out of here. And he would be in the right. It's the captain of the team, and he's not a bad player that got benched. So, although he did have a down year, it is worth pointing out. He did have a down year. So, okay, I go, well, I'm looking on Twitter, and I'm seeing the common sentiment about Couturier, which is, I don't know what he's expecting. His contract's basically immovable. He has he has left on his contract 6 years, $7.75 million per year. And he is age 31. So that contract runs through his age 37 season. Pretty immovable, right? Idea. There's hiccups. There's a lot of problems with it. Don't get me wrong. But in theory, wouldn't you like to do a Jeff Skinner for Sean Couturier swap? 2 bad contracts, 2 players that are still relatively productive, but have maybe fell out of favor with their incoming, or in Philly's case, staying put, head coach. So why this is a trade I even thought of, there's some benefit to both sides. Skinner has 3 years left on his contract. Couturier has 6. And I think Couturier is a more complete player at this point and will actually age better than Skinner because he does more than just score goals. But if you're Philly, why are you doing it? Well, okay, player doesn't fit as well, but we shave off 3 years of the Couturier contract. Instead of being stuck with a bad contract for 6 years, we're only stuck with a bad contract for 3 years. So that's why Philly would do it. Why the Sabres would do it? Simply put, Couturier fills a need perfectly. He would be the third-line center immediately, and he would be an upgrade on that position, even at the level of play that he's had in the past year or two. Under John Tortorella, it's not as good, right? In 103 games, 55 points. That's not strong. Previous Tortorella, the last non-Tortorella season he played, was the COVID-shortened year, where in 45 games, he had 41 points. Before that, 59 points in 69 games, and before that, back-to-back 76-point seasons. So, what I have is a player that pre-Tortorella was still producing. Maybe it's just the coach that is causing this downfall. And even if he doesn't restore himself to being a point-a-game player, I have a excellent shutdown centerman. He is going to make it a long time in this league, I think, because he is a great defensive player. Jay Fresh Hockey tweeted out some of the advanced numbers on Sean Couturier. His WAR, wins above replacement numbers in different situations. So, by percentile of the entire league, what percentile is Couturier offensively? Okay, well, even strength offense, 58th percentile. Slightly above average, but not bad. Power play, not good. 18%, really bad. You don't want him on the power play. Finishing, really bad. 3%. His offense is going to be in his playmaking. He is more of a playmaking center when he's at his best offensively. But defense is key here also. You got Tage, you got Cousins. What do you want from your third line center? You want a guy that can produce some offense, but also can be your reliable shutdown guy. Even strength defensive WAR for Sean Couturier, according to Jay Fresh Hockey, 80th percentile. Penalty kill WAR, 85th percentile. We are talking about a great defensive centerman. So what the Sabres would be doing is saying, okay, both contracts are bad. We're going to eat it for 3 extra years because this player makes way more sense for our current lineup than Jeff Skinner does. That's the logic that I'm trying to get behind for this idea is Flyers, you get a bad contract that's shorter. Sabres, you get a bad contract too, but the player makes way more sense for your lineup, and he's exactly what you would need for right now. The why it doesn't work, there's a bunch of reasons, right? There's a bunch of reasons. One, you probably don't want to sign up for 6 years of Couturier. I get that. That's completely understandable. I don't want to. I'm just sick of waiting around here for them to win, and I think this guy would help them win right now. By the way, all the leadership stuff and changing the culture, holding players accountable that we've been talking about this offseason, Couturier is the captain of the Flyers. So the guy that I've been talking about all offseason, which is, can I get someone that has leadership qualities that also backs it up on the ice? I think this guy could be that in Couturier. Beyond that, why it doesn't work, though, length of the contract for Couturier. One that my buddy Ryan actually pointed out on Twitter that I didn't even think of when I tweeted this out that might be a stumbling block is Jeff Skinner and John Tortorella. That would not work. There's no worse pairing, I would think, player-coach maybe in the sport than Tortorella and Skinner. Okay, but let me work to have a workaround here. Give me a chance to defend myself here. What if the Flyers just waive Skinner? That's it. Just waive him. And then it becomes like a cheaper Couturier buyout. They rid themselves of Couturier, who the coach might not like anyway. And they don't, if you bought out Couturier today, it'd be 12-year commitment. Here's a 3-year commitment. Just waive Skinner, send him to the minors. If he doesn't report, you can terminate the contract. Perfect. So the Flyers get out of it. The bigger stumbling block that is I don't have a counter to, which is probably where this idea dies, is both players have no movement clauses. So you'd have to have both players sign up for it. Couturier would have to want to go to Buffalo. That might be possible. If he wants out of Philly, here's a shot. You don't have many options. There's not many teams that are going to take your contract. If the Sabres said they would, that might be the only game in town for you to get out of Philly. So Couturier maybe could waive it. Why is Skinner going to waive it to go to play for Tortorella, though? Like, Skinner knows what he's signing up for, doesn't he? Skinner, when Skinner's agent, the trade could be done. Sabres agree to terms with the Flyers. They call Sean Couturier. He says, okay, I'll do it. I just want out of Tortorella. I'll go play for Lindy Ruff. I'll go play for the Sabres. Okay, the next call, your final roadblock, you call Jeff Skinner, and you say, this deal's done. He's in. What do you think? Waive the no movement clause? Skinner sits down with his agent. What does he say? What's going to happen here? I'm either going to go get benched by John Tortorella, or they're going to waive me and send me to the minors unless I don't report, and then I'm giving away all this guaranteed money. I don't want to do that. Skinner, I don't know how you get Skinner to do it. Give him a piece of the team, maybe. Maybe he just wants to be a good soldier. I'd be crossing my fingers at that point. But a lot of roadblocks, I get it, but just an idea to throw out there because Skinner is called an immovable contract. I saw Couturier being called an immovable contract. Couturier works for the Sabres on the roster. Let's do a little bit of a flop here, but that's probably not going to happen. When we come back, Trey Matthews from Locked On Devils joins the show. We'll get the scoop on what went wrong and right in New Jersey for Lindy Ruff. That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by Monopoly Go. All right, game on. We got to pause here, take some time to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure and plenty more. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go to get off the bench, and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. And we are back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks, everybody, for making your first listen every day. We are joined now on the show by Trey Matthews from Locked On Devils at TreyMatt4 if you want to follow him on Twitter or get the latest on the New Jersey Devils. Of course, check out Locked On Devils. What's up, Trey? Hope you're having a good spring here despite no playoffs. I know we're used to it. I know you're not.
Well, no, I'm pretty used to it because last year was the first time that the Devils made the playoffs since 2018, and even in 2018, they were gentlemen swept by the Lightning. So yeah, I'm very accustomed to a very long off season, but I did expect more from the Devils just because like they did have that historic season, and unfortunately, just a lot of things didn't go their way, including injuries.
Yeah, we'll get into all of it as we'll talk lots of Lindy Ruff, who was the Devils coach, now, of course, is the Sabres coach. We'll get into his tenure in New Jersey. Before we do that, though, on their coach search, what do you think? Timeline, candidates? I feel like every time I read about their search, Berube is the first name that comes up, but you tell me.
That's a good question, and based on everyone I've talked to, we don't really know at this point. And Tom Fitzgerald just says like he's going to interview everybody, including interim head coach Travis Green, for the position. I wouldn't be surprised if Fitzgerald just goes the cheap route and just makes Green the full-time head coach. Okay. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Do I want that to happen? No, but I wouldn't be stunned if he did. But for the time being, we don't really know. I think for right now, the Devils have their priorities shifted in other areas, including where they're going to be at in the draft lottery, because quite honestly, they could trade away that pick to get someone good, but that's obviously down the line. But based on everything I've been seeing on social media and based on like the whole narratives during the course of the offseason, it seems like the coaching search is just taking a back seat compared to other hot topic issues for Devils.
Yeah, definitely. But even when I say Berube, that might be more from his end, because I was reading Elliot Friedman on him, and he's got family in Philly and wants to be close to there, so he might want the Devils job more than other jobs. But of course, that's going to be up to Tom Fitzgerald to see what they end up doing. So let's get right into it on Lindy's tenure, though, during the time. It was a couple of years, and before we get into specifics, I don't know, what's your overall takeaway of his entire tenure? Would you call it a success? Maybe is it somewhere in between a failure and a success?
Oh, I'm going to get so much slack for this. But honestly, I didn't have a problem with Lindy Ruff. I think for what he did, I think he did a good job with the Devils, especially developing the young core in Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, and Jesper Bratt, because Nico Hischier has now become one of the best two-way players in the NHL, I would argue. Last year, he was a finalist for the Selke Award. Obviously, he lost to Patrice Bergeron, but he was right there. Jack Hughes, I think he can become one of the biggest superstars in the league if he can just stay healthy. I honestly think, similar to what Wayne Gretzky said, that Jack Hughes has the best chance of catching Connor McDavid. But the problem is he's just never healthy. And take that however you want to take that, Sabres fans. That's not my words. And Jesper Bratt, he was an all-star just this past season. But obviously he was used as a replacement for Jack Hughes. But still, the fact that he was named an all-star really speaks volume. So I would just say that I think Lindy Ruff did do a good job. And he had the most historic season in recent memory because the Devils won, like 53 games last year, which was the most in franchise history. And you got to keep in mind, this is a championship organization. They've won 3 Stanley Cups. And the fact that they surpassed their franchise record in wins last season, that speaks volume. So I think Lindy Ruff did do a pretty decent job. Did he do everything right? No. There's some things I heavily disagreed with him on, including like goalie tandem or how the power play was being executed. Obviously, he's not the power play coach, but you get it. It's he's the last line of defense. My thing is, like, Lindy wasn't perfect, but I think he did do a pretty decent job, and I think he gets an unfair amount of the blame.
Yeah, there were, I remember, was it last season, right at the beginning, where they set the record, like you mentioned, where there were Fire Lindy chants in the crowd. That was maybe only one game. It's not like that was happening for months. But I definitely remember him getting a rough ride at times in New Jersey. But let's get into some of the specifics on what you just mentioned, Lindy's time with New Jersey. Let's start with Hughes and Hischier. I know that quote about Hughes from Gretzky, and it's kind of funny that this could be coincidence. It could be just Hughes got to an age where it was time to take that step, and no matter who the coach he would have done it. But how much of Lindy getting there and then Hughes going from they get a little bit of a slow start, right, to his career. He wasn't McDavid point a game out of his career, but I mean, I'm with you. I think he's one of the 5 best centers in hockey right now. I don't want to give Lindy all the credit for that, but would you say he kind of helped Hughes get to that point?
It's funny when I when I spoke to Jack Hughes, he had nothing but positive things to say about Lindy Ruff. Obviously, this was like last year. During exit interviews, people were asking all the players, like, how do you feel about Lindy Ruff? Do you want to see him get re-signed? Do you want to see him get extended? And Lindy Ruff's players came to bat for him, including Jack Hughes, including Nico Hischier. And I've said this on my show religiously, like last year. If the players wanted Lindy Ruff gone, he'd be gone. Like if Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, if they went to Tom Fitzgerald and said, hey, we don't want him here anymore, we want a different coach, I think both of them have enough power within the organization to entice a decision.
Sure.
And this time around, I had the chance to ask Jack Hughes shortly after the Anaheim Ducks game his thoughts on Lindy Ruff, and he seemed to deflect the question a little bit. Same with Timo Meier. The only person who answered my question head on was Nico Hischier. He had nothing but positive things to say about Lindy. At that point, I was just like, okay, the Devils are in a bit of a funk. The California road trip is not really going according to plan because they beat the San Jose Sharks. They lost to the Anaheim Ducks. They got swept by the Ducks this season, if you would believe it. And then a couple days later, I was going to go with the team to Los Angeles to cover the Kings and Devils, and that's a matchup that did not fall into their favor. And I even said it in a few TV appearances and also on my show. If the Devils lost 2 of those 3 matchups in California, most likely Lindy Ruff was going to be gone. So at Crypto.com Arena or Staples Center, however you want to call it, at the conclusion of the game, you could just cut the tension with a knife. It seemed like a lot of people were on edge. Eric Holla, he got a little snippy with me post-game. Timo Meier, he didn't seem really all that energetic. And Lindy Ruff, he didn't really seem all that energetic during his post-game press conference either. And at that point, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if Lindy Ruff loses his job. And my prediction came true. Devils lost 2 of those 3 matchups in Cali.
Yeah.
And as a result, he got the can.
Yeah. This episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. The playoffs are in full swing for both hockey and basketball, but baseball is also going on right now in the regular season, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. What do you think this season, last year, 50 whatever wins, they win a playoff series. This year, they fall so short of expectations. What do you think really went into that? Like, how much of it was Lindy? How much of it also is injuries? It was one of the first things you just mentioned when we started here, was that injuries played into their season. How much do you think injuries played into the results they had, going from, again, playoff team, one of the best in the sport last year, to this year where they were right there with the Sabres, where it just felt like in the final weeks and months, it was like, well, if we go on a 5-game win streak, maybe we're back in it, but you never really felt like you're all the way in the race.
Well, the only consistent thing about this Devils team was their inconsistency, because the most amount of games they won in a row was 3. However, the most games that they lost in a row was 3. It just goes to show you that they were never consistent. So they never went on a lengthy winning streak, but they never went on a lengthy losing streak either.
Yeah.
And I think most of that just plays to injuries, because Jack Hughes, he was sidelined not once but twice due to an arm injury, and as a result, he had to get shoulder surgery, because the first go around back in November, he sustained a right shoulder injury against the St. Louis Blues when he went crashing into the boards. And then come January, he slipped up on his own skates and he re-aggravated that arm once again, falling onto the ground, and he missed a significant amount of time through the All-Star break.
Sure.
Nico Hischier, he missed a significant time thanks to one of your players, Connor Clifton, hitting him in the head.
Remember that. Yeah.
Clifton was suspended 2 games as a result. Hischier missed nearly a month of action. That really hurt the Devils. And just so many other players like Timo Meier, he missed time due to injury. Curtis Lazar didn't even finish the rest of the season. I think Eric Holla was also dealing with something at one end or another. And then Vitek Vanecek, a lot of people don't remember this, but prior to him being dealt to the Sharks, he was also sidelined due to injury. It just goes to show you that this Devils team, I don't think they're as bad as people were portraying them to be. Yeah. It was just mostly the injuries, because I told everyone on my show, which is, if Lindy Ruff is hypothetically fired, I don't expect an Edmonton Oilers situation where they make a coaching change and now they're on a 16-game winning streak. And aren't they on the brink of advancing to the next round in the Stanley Cup playoffs? So, and I even spoke to Chico Resch about this, which is, I don't think a coaching change is going to be a quick fix for the Devils. If anything, just expect for Travis Green to become the interim head coach, and don't expect like the Devils to go on a lengthy game heater as you're projecting them to be. I don't think Lindy Ruff was entirely at fault. Now, I'm not saying he's perfect, but I'm just saying, like, in that sort of circumstance, the Devils were just too far gone, and there was nothing that was going to be a quick fix for them, because it wasn't just coaching, defense, goaltending, injuries, just so many other factors.
Yeah. Trey, how do you expect it to go for him here? I mean, there's a lot of emotion tied up in Lindy coming back. He is beloved in this area. I mean, he was here from 1979 to 2013. It's hard to not be beloved when you're a part of a community that long. But, of course, 13-year playoff drought, people only care about wins right now. So how do you expect it to go? I mean, they're the youngest team in hockey, but the Devils, I think, up until maybe even they still are right now, the second youngest team in hockey. If they're not, they're one of them.
Yeah, they're one of them. Not second youngest, but I think they're one of them.
Maybe last year they were for a time. Doesn't matter. They're one of them, and the Sabres are the youngest. So he's stepping into a somewhat similar situation. I don't think that they have a Jack Hughes. I'm hoping Tage Thompson can return to that. But just in general, how do you think it's going to go for Lindy here?
Well, I'll give the Sabres faithful some hope. When was the last time you guys made the playoffs?
Oh, man. 2011, man. It's been. I was in high school the last time it happened.
I was in elementary school for reference.
Yeah.
Who was at the helm? Who was behind the bench?
It was the man that's going to be behind the bench again. Yeah.
Right. Lindy Ruff. Just giving you some hope right there. And I think also for Lindy, he's really good at developing the young guys. And Tom Fitzgerald acknowledged that in his press conference shortly after he was relieved of his head coaching duties. Mm-hmm. He did a phenomenal job developing the young core of Heischer, Bratt, and Hughes. And those three players are definitely going to be the future for Devils. And not to mention, you add Timo Meier to the mix. Dougie Hamilton, I still think, is one of the best defensemen in the entire NHL. Lindy Ruff did a phenomenal job with the Devils, and they were projected to be anywhere from a fringe team to a lottery team last season. And then they went on a lengthy winning streak at one point, 13 games, and they made it to the playoffs. They won a playoff series. I'm just going to give the Sabres fans some hope right then and there. I think Lindy Ruff, I was kind of surprised that he did return to the Sabres. I thought the Devils would be his last stop, but I'm sure the front office called him and said, we have an offer that you cannot refuse. And now he's back, and he's been a longtime player, longtime coach. Last time the Sabres were in the playoffs, he was at the helm. He does a good job of developing young players, and the Sabres are the youngest team in the NHL going into the 2023-2024 season. 25.5 is the average age, I believe.
Yep.
I think, honestly, I really do hope within these next few years of Lindy Ruff being the head coach, the Sabres get back to the playoffs.
I'm hoping even next year. I'll let you go here with this, but it's you could maybe relate to this with the Devils, that I'm watching these Eastern playoffs, Trey, and like I'm watching Washington get hammered. The Islanders are getting outshot in most of these games, bad, and they might lose today. Like I've got maybe Tampa too is starting to age out, and Stamkos might leave. I'm feeling hopeful about the conference. Like I actually said this the other day. I am penciling New Jersey into the playoffs next year because to me, it's just they got to stay healthy. With goalie, maybe they have to figure out too. But otherwise, Islanders, Capitals, like the bar wasn't that high to make the playoffs this year, and it's. I feel like the Sabres got to do it now, just because again, there's not 10 good teams in the East anymore. And
factor in the Flyers were right there, and they completely crashed and burned.
Yep.
The Penguins, Sidney Crosby did his best to put the team on his back. And I'll just say this. I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not. If Sidney Crosby willed that Penguins team into the playoffs after everything that took place, you have to put him in the discussion for MVP. I'm not saying he should win it. I'm not making that statement at all, but you have to put him in the discussion because what he did was incredible. Devils, if they were just healthy, who knows what they could have amounted to. But the Eastern Conference, in my opinion, is weak right now. And you just mentioned the Lightning, the Islanders, the Capitals. At this point, Alexander Ovechkin doesn't care. He just wants to he has 2 years to break the Wayne Gretzky goal record, and then he's going to ride off into the sunset. And he doesn't have anything more to accomplish, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I think the Sabres this time around do have a chance.
And maybe Toronto will finally blow it up. Although I'm done holding my breath if that's going to happen. I've been thinking that for 5 years, so we'll see though. All right, Trey Matthews at TreyMatt4 on Twitter to follow him there, and check out Locked On Devils for all the latest there. Thanks again, Trey. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, our thanks to Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils. That's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening today. Next time on the show, we're going to talk Dylan Cozens and whether or not Lindy is going to get the most out of him. What happened last season for Dylan Cozens? We'll dive into the numbers. We'll dive into what happened, and we'll talk about Cozens coming up next on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day, and we'll talk to you next time. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports today, NBA playoffs, LeBron, where he's going next, if he's going to retire, the Nuggets advancing. You've got the NHL playoffs as well, all available on the Locked On Sports Today podcast, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.